Well, greetings everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. In a recent program where I discussed the State of the Union address, I already told you a few facts about our failing economy. And today I'd like to add some facts to that, but I, at the same time, want to give you some encouragement. First of all, let me read to you from an article by the Wall Street Journal, dated February 2. And this article had this to say. It said, one rule of budget reporting is to watch what the politicians are spending this year. By that measure, the budget that President Obama released yesterday for fiscal 2011 is one of the greatest spend while you can documents in American history. The budget reveals that overall federal outlays will reach $3.72 trillion in fiscal 2010 and keep rising to $3.834 trillion in 2011. It goes on to say that all of this spending must be financed. And so, deficits and taxes are both scheduled to rise to record levels. This is a giant tax increase on American companies that operate overseas, and it includes no offsetting in the US 35% corporate tax rate, which is among the highest in the world. But even these tax increases, this magazine points out, will not be enough to pay for the spending. USA Today published another very interesting and revealing article. Because look, my friends, if you have a spending frenzy, you can just imagine that the deficit, which is already astronomical, will only rise. And that's exactly what USA Today wrote on February 2. That magazine said, since taking office last year, President Obama has been preaching fiscal restraint while practicing something else. Nothing shows us more than the budget he released Monday. His administration is planning a deficit for this year of almost $1.6 trillion. Now this is a deficit, $1.6 trillion. The article goes on to say, to make this mind-boggling number easier to understand, it helps to subtract 8 zeros. Say you earned $21,000 a year, spent $37,000, and borrowed $16,000 to cover the difference. Maybe you could get away with this for a year or two to get through unusually hard times. Beyond that, though, it's a recipe for financial disaster. Such is the fate facing the federal government. And then it goes on to say America is on a collision course with a kind of debt crisis associated with third world countries. America to be compared with a third world country? Who would have thought that 50 years ago? To put it mildly, Money News reported on January 29 that the Congressional Budget Office has called the U.S. budget outlook bleak. Well, bleak is a pretty terrible understatement. The Associated Press wrote on February 4 that the number of newly laid-off workers filing initial claims for jobless benefits rose unexpectedly last week. Evidence that layoffs are continuing. And of course further evidence that there are less and less jobs available. Now, I pointed out last time that they are saying that the unemployment rate is about 10%, but the real unemployment rate, if you include those who are underemployed or not even filing for benefit in regards to unemployment, it's probably more like 17%. And then somebody wrote me and says, yeah, but that doesn't even include those who are self-employed. And they're not covered. So it is true, it's probably more like 20%, if not higher, which means that every fifth person from the labor environment, the labor market, is unemployed. Now this doesn't include children, this doesn't include, let's say, students who would be studying. Can you imagine that? Every fifth person of somebody who could be gainfully employed is not. What a terrible, terrible situation. What about Social Security? Now here's an article from CNN Money, which was published on February 4. And that article wrote, another huge bailout is starting, this time for the Social Security system. A report from the Congressional Budget Office shows that for the first time in 25 years, Social Security is taking in less in taxes than it is spending on benefits. Social Security will be $28 billion in the hole this fiscal year, which ends September 30. And of course, then it goes on to say that Social Security currently provides more than half the income for a majority of retirees. Given the declines in stock prices and home values that have whacked millions of people, the program seems likely to become more important in the future as a source for retirement income rather than less important. Until this year, CNN concludes, Social Security was a problem for the future. Now it is a problem for the present. My friends, these are terrible times we are going to experience pretty soon. And especially now it is apparently affecting widows and orphans and perhaps fatherless, those who are dependent on even Social Security. They will be hard hit as well, in addition to everybody else. But as I said, my friends, there is hope. I mean, there's not much hope in this world. There is not much hope that our government, our administration, will be able to do anything about it, because they won't be. But God is there in heaven. Now, He is the one who created you. He is the one who is aware of your life. Now, many don't believe in God, or many don't believe that God is actively involved today at all. But I'd like to read to you briefly from a report which was published in the Old Testament. I'd like to read to you from 1 Kings chapter 17 in the Living Bible's version. It talked about the prophet Elijah. And he went to a place, not even in Israel, and he arrived at the gates of the city. Then he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her for a cup of water. As she was going to get it, he called to her, "Bring me also a bite of bread." And she said, "I swear by the Lord our God, or your God, that I haven't a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jar. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I must die of starvation." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go ahead and cook that last meal, but bake me a little loaf of bread first, and afterwards there will be still enough food for you and your son. For the Lord God of Israel says that there will always be plenty of flour and oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again." So she did, as Elijah said. She and Elijah and her son continued to eat from her supply of flour and oil as long as it was needed. For no matter how much they used, there was always plenty left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. Now some will laugh at a story like that and say, "Oh, I don't believe this. It's just a fairy tale." I believe the accuracy of this story, and I believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it shows that God can help people in unexpected ways. If we put our trust and hope in God, if we are looking towards Him, looking and searching His righteousness first and applying it in our lives and living righteous lives and doing what God tells us in His Word, we can be rest assured God will take care of us, even in times of need, even in times of famine and of hunger. Remember that it says in the book of Psalms that David says, "I've been young and now I'm old, but I've never ever seen the righteous forsaken, or his children begging for bread." There was a widow in New Testament times, and she was praying to God day and night in the temple, and she was rewarded for it by being able to see the newborn Christ child. A tremendous reward she has received. God is taking care of His people. He is going to take care of you, my friends, if you are putting your trust in Him rather than in human beings who won't be able to help you. Look for Him, stand in awe, and He will deliver you from famine in ways you might not even expect. Thanks very much for watching. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.